It's Friday afternoon rush hour. Leisha calls her son and asks him to get dinner started. She makes a mental note to remind her daughter to check that her uniform and water bottle are clean and ready for her game tomorrow. She also sets a reminder to make a follow-up oncology appointment for her dad next week. Maybe she can reschedule that client meeting and leave work early to do that next Thursday? Life is busy, some days feel overloaded with scheduling and communication, and Leisha is tired. But Leisha is grateful that her family can pull together to get through busy weeks like this one, and the last one, and probably the next one. Maybe next year, she can afford to take her family on that big vacation she dreams about in her non-existent free time. Like many people in middle adulthood, Leisha has a lot on her mind. As one of the longest stages of lifespan development, how does love and family life evolve and adapt to the changes encountered during middle adulthood? Are there individual, group, or environmental variables that promote health, happiness, and satisfaction amid these changes? What is the sandwich generation? Does all this change and responsibility lead to the dreaded midlife crisis? In this chapter, you'll learn what current research says about these questions and more. 40-year-old Amir's life is much different than it was 15 years ago. At 25 years old, he never could have pictured that his hours, days, and weeks would be spent cultivating his garden, raising his kids, plus 2 rescue cats, and managing a team of employees. And though his days are long and often exhausting, he feels more certain of himself and his goals than he ever has. His time in the garden allows him to unwind with a quiet, yet productive activity, sandwiched between the optimistic beginnings of early adulthood and the experience and wisdom of older adulthood. Socio-emotional development in middle adulthood may often be overshadowed. However, between ages 30 and 59 years, adults experience many important psychosocial changes as they take on increasing responsibilities within their relationships, work life, homes, and communities, known as role expansion. For many adults, role expansion results in an increased sense of control and accomplishment known as mastery. However, psychoanalytic theorists have noted that while this time of life is typically a period of positive growth, failure to manage and embrace the challenges of middle adulthood may result in a feeling of developmental stagnation or crisis. In this section, you will learn theories on the development of personality in middle adulthood in the context of research regarding stability and change. Self in middle adulthood. Spanning 3 decades, middle adulthood is typified by important changes in our sense of self. In this section, you will review how different theories describe and explain the self during midlife. As you read about these theories, be on the lookout for what features these developmental theories have in common, and for the concepts that are unique to each. Psychosocial theory of development. Generativity versus stagnation. Erik Erikson's lifespan theory of psychosocial development, Erikson, 1963, can be a valuable framework for articulating the unique challenges and outcomes of the development of self in middle adulthood. Erikson called the primary challenge of this stage of life generativity versus stagnation. The key to healthy development of self at this time of life is to resist the temptation to rest on the accomplishments and values of young adulthood and focus one's energy on giving back to others through mentoring and care of others, as well as continuing to have productive and creative endeavors that are beneficial to the self and society. A developmental task Erikson called generativity. This term intentionally evokes connotations of productivity, as well as the importance of guidance and creating a better world for future generations. Erikson called it the virtue of care, which includes the care to do, taking the initiative to generate creative solutions in the form of ideas or products, as well as the task of caring for or taking care of those who need guidance or protection. Evans, 1967. Generativity, broadly, is about having a sense of productiveness and a sense of purpose, feeling that who you are and what you are doing is contributing to the well-being of society, your family, your children, your culture, and/or your career. Some types of generativity included having biological offspring, parental/caregiver, nurturing and raising children, or cultural generativity, contributing to culture. Generativity requires a role expansion that goes beyond self-serving to the service of others, including family, workplaces, community, and society. McAdams and Guo, 2015. Reitzman, 1994. For many, rising to the challenge of these generative roles results in the rewarding experience of role enhancement. Sieber, 1974. However, Erikson warned that ignoring or resisting the generativity challenge can result in stagnation or unwillingness to show generative concern. which could be experienced as an unsatisfying developmental plateau, or even as a panicked and narcissistic regression to immature self-absorption. Seasons of life. Erikson's theory of generativity is not the only one to reflect the personal experiences of its author. In the 1970s, U.S. psychologist Dan Levinson used interviews with adult men to outline his book, The Seasons of a Man's Life. Levinson, 1986, saying, "At 46, I wanted to study the transition into middle age in order to understand what I had been going through myself." Levinson used the term life structure to describe the pattern or design of a person's life at any given time, based on how the person chooses to prioritize their time and energy. He proposed that men develop through various eras across the lifespan, with transition periods between each era. According to Levinson, adult men transition into middle adulthood between the ages of 28 and 33 years 1, as they become aware of possible missteps taken in the naivete of early adulthood and revise their goals and priorities to move forward with greater clarity and maturity. Ages 33 through 40 years represent the second life structure of adulthood, where the focus shifts to making contributions to family, work, friends, and community. Levinson's midlife transition, ages 40 to 45 years, prompts men to evaluate whether they accomplish the goals of young adulthood before entering middle adulthood, where the patterns and choices reflect many aspects of Erikson's concept of generativity. Levinson's spouse Judy worked with him to conduct interviews with adult women during the 1980s and early 1990s. These findings were published in The Seasons of a Woman's Life, Levinson 1997, and concluded that the lives of adult women exhibit many of the same patterns as those of men. Judy Levinson finished this work after Levinson's death in 1994. It should be noted that the conclusions of Levinson's longitudinal studies of men and women were based on a small sample of mostly white American adults from the same generation, so these findings cannot be generalized to adults beyond those demographic characteristics. Valiant's theory of successful aging. Expanding the influence of the psychoanalytic approach to the study of adult psychosocial development, psychiatrist George Valiant added that adults respond to life transitions by employing defense mechanisms. A defense mechanism is a psychological strategy for managing the anxiety and stress triggered by developmental challenges. Valiant et al., 1986. Also, based on a longitudinal study of adult men, Valiant and colleagues argued that some defense mechanisms, like humor and sublimation, i.e., channeling anxiety toward a productive outlet, are mature ways of handling stress and promote positive aging during life transitions. Other defense mechanisms, like denial or acting out, are immature coping mechanisms and can inhibit well-being and healthy growth. Prout et al., 2022. The repeated concern with crisis or anxiety that links the theoretical views of Erikson, Levinson, and Valiant on midlife development served as the basis for the myth of the midlife crisis. Personality development in middle adulthood. Theories of personality can be generally classified into two approaches. First are those that emphasize traits, including their stability over time and their interaction with the environment. Second are those that emphasize development and growth, including the power of the environment to influence personality change. Recall from 4.2 Temperament and Personality in Infants and Toddlers, the Big Five or five-factor model of personality describes personality according to 5 traits: conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extroversion, sometimes represented by the acronym OCEAN. McRae and Costa, 2008. Trait theories generally predict that while environments may change, our predisposition to respond to certain environments remains stable. In other words, personality predicts our feelings, behavior, and even the environments we choose for ourselves, a process known as niche picking. On the other hand, developmental approaches to personality assert that personality develops over time in response to challenges or support encountered in our social environments. Rogers's humanistic theory, 1980, took a growth-oriented approach to personality development, asserting that people require acceptance, genuineness, and empathy in their social environments to nurture positive and congruent, or authentic, personality growth over the lifespan. Figure 14.2. Trait theories. Since 1995, the MIDAS, Midlife in the United States project, has been collecting longitudinal data on American adults ages 25 years and older, and the more recently developed MIDJA studying adults in Japan. Some of these participants have been followed for more than 30 years, providing behavioral, psychological, social, and biological data on their aging. Data from MIDAS and other longitudinal research find that personality traits generally remain stable once a person reaches adulthood. Damian et al., 2019. Shea and Willis, 1991. In other words, if you are introverted at 25 years old, you're unlikely to be extroverted at 50 years old. This overall stability can be explained by gene-environment correlations, the reciprocal influence between an individual's genetic predispositions and their environment, which often encourages the expression of their genetic predispositions. In the case of personality, evidence suggests that its temperamental foundations are largely genetically determined, Modis et al., 2019, and associated with differences in the structure and functioning of the nervous system. Degnan and Fox, 2007. Poshi et al., 2018. In other words, each person's genetic predispositions are naturally more compatible with the demands of certain environments, a match known as goodness of fit. Walks, 1994. Individuals will be more likely to seek out good-fitting, comfortable environments that, in turn, encourage their natural dispositions to thrive. Sutton and Costa, 2010. For example, an extroverted adult might feel comfortable in a job that requires confidence in approaching and talking to strangers, so they become a salesperson or work in customer service. Their job allows them to practice and be rewarded for behaviors associated with their extroverted personality, which leads to an increase in the expression of those behaviors. The alignment of a person's personality with their environment supports the stability of personality over time in a gene-environment correlation and is predictive of successful aging. Kuj et al., 2020. Growth and development theories. Researchers have studied whether there are environments or experiences that predict or even require personality change over time. Cross-cultural comparisons of the stability of temperamental and personality traits suggest that culturally valued traits have more stability. While many individualistic societies like the United States prioritize individuality and independence, many collectivist cultures value a person's investment in and conformity to group goals, whether at work or at home, which may be facilitated by adjusting one's personality to meet the demands of the situation. For example, compared to Americans, Japanese adults show somewhat more variation in personality traits over time, as they adapt their personality to best serve their environment, rather than vice versa. Chopik and Kitayama, 2018. Even in individualistic countries, research has shown potential for growth and change in personality characteristics based on experiences. For example, in the United States and Australia, adults who have taken on greater leadership roles at work have shown increases in conscientiousness, a Big Five personality trait associated with a willingness to be responsible, organized, and goal-directed. A. et al., 2021. Consistent with Rogers' humanistic theory of personality, individual differences in social contexts may predict maladaptive changes to personality. Negative experiences in balancing work and family roles, a major task for middle-aged adults, predict increases in neuroticism, a Big Five personality trait associated with anxiety and self-doubt, and decreases in conscientiousness. Lee et al., 2024. Adults who experience discrimination in their day-to-day lives are also more likely to show increased neuroticism and decreased conscientiousness and agreeableness, a Big Five personality trait associated with being trusting and friendly, over a 10-year period. Sutton et al., 2016. Daily and pervasive stress, including in the form of discrimination and microaggressions, can negatively impact our psychological functioning and health outcomes. However, intervention and prevention efforts aimed at reducing discrimination experiences and increasing positive coping may represent an important pathway in promoting resilience. Lewis et al., 2015. Intersections and contexts. Historical context and personality development. Psychologists have noted that the way age is defined and measured may affect findings on adult personality. Typically, longitudinal studies of personality measure chronological age, or age in years since birth, but researchers can also measure subjective age, which describes how old a person feels. Having a lower subjective age, feeling younger than you are, predicts increases over time in openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Stephan et al., 2015. As for chronological age, a person's generational cohort reflects their experiences, which can include different historical challenges, such as war, poverty, and discrimination, as well as changing cultural norms and values, such as loyalty, collaboration, and skepticism. When researchers compared 3 cohorts of adults, those born 1883 to 1913, 1914 to 1944, and 1945 to 1976, they found that in middle adulthood, Those cohorts who were born in later, more recent, demonstrated lower levels of maturity-related traits, such as agreeableness and neuroticism, and higher levels of agency-related traits, such as extroversion and openness, compared to middle-aged adults born in earlier older cohorts. Researchers speculated that for later-born cohorts, increases in cultural individualism might promote agency-related traits of extroversion and openness, whereas delayed entry into roles such as spouse and parent compared to the past might decrease maturity-related traits. Later-born cohorts were also more likely to become more agreeable with age compared to earlier-born cohorts, Brandt et al., 2022. Age cohorts popularly known as the silent generation, born 1925 to 1945, boomers born 1946 to 1964, Generation X, born 1965 to 1979, the millennials, born 1980 to 1994, and Generation Z, born 1995 to 2012, have each experienced important socio-historical events and changes that shaped their development differently. Some examples are listed here. What others can you think of? How might these changes shape these generations' values, personalities, and worldviews? The Silent Generation, Great Depression, World War II, radio broadcasts available in most homes. The Boomers, Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam War, televisions available in most homes. Generation X, Gulf War, September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks, cable TV in most homes. The Millennials, legalization of same-sex marriage, increased access to the internet and cell phones. Generation Z, COVID-19, rise of social media. One thing is certain, personality development continues in meaningful ways in middle adulthood, as adults select and adapt to changing roles at home, work, and in their communities. Whether certain personal qualities develop with age to enable or prepare adults for these changes, or whether it is the life changes themselves that foster personal growth, middle adulthood is associated with increasing socio-emotional maturity. For example, the goal-oriented Big Five trait of conscientiousness is the trait most likely to increase from youth into middle adulthood, as adults juggle expanding responsibilities as caregivers, employees, and community servants. Wagner et al., 2019. In support of Erickson's virtue of care, adults in middle adulthood are more likely to make altruistic choices when presented with hypothetical dilemmas, compared to younger adults. Freund and Blanchardfield's 2014. They are also more likely than younger adults to report priorities consistent with generativity, such as feeling needed, showing concern for future generations, having an interest in teaching others, and taking actions to protect others. Einolf, 2014. McAdams et al., 1992. The achievement of successful outcomes in middle adulthood appears to be highly influenced by the goodness of fit principle, or whether a person's interests, goals, abilities, and traits are aligned with their environments or experiences. For example, adults who find jobs that fit their personalities, like the extroverted salesperson, are more likely to be satisfied at work, Judge et al., 1998-1999, because they are more likely to be good at the job, which leads to both intrinsic rewards, such as pride, and extrinsic rewards, such as praise and professional advancement. Tet et al., 2013. On the other hand, negative interactions between family and work roles predict anxiety and subsequent negative adaptations to personality. Lee et al., 2024. However, negative life events are not always correlated with negative personal development. Adults who activated goal-oriented coping mechanisms in response to health fears associated with their possible selves were more likely to engage in healthy behaviors. Hooker and Kaus, 1994. And cancer survivors show a greater increase in personal mastery than those adults who have never had cancer. Pudrovska, 2010. The influence appears to be bidirectional. Personal qualities can predict life experiences, and life experiences can affect personal growth. Stability versus change. So, is adult personality stable or changeable? Research suggests that. The answer is probably both. McAdams, 1995. Offers a theory of personality that attempts to resolve the inconsistencies in personality development data. Figure 14.3. He suggests that personality can be measured at 3 levels. Level 1, general dispositional traits. Level 2, personal choices. Level 3, personal narrative. McAdams argues that dispositional traits, such as those measured by the Big Five, are relatively stable over time, Level 1. However, the way people act on those traits, Level 2, including the choices they make to attain personal goals and adapt to life circumstances, and the subsequent life story or identity they build, level 3, can reflect both stability and change, depending on both personal and environmental factors. The continuation of identity development. Our life story or personal narrative, as conceptualized by McAdams, continues to develop across adulthood. Our personal narrative helps to create an integrated sense of self by linking together our personality, priorities, and experiences into a coherent story or identity. McLean and Syed, 2015. So even though identity development emerges as a primary focus or challenge of adolescence and early adulthood in Erikson's framework, our identity continues to evolve and grow throughout adulthood to adapt to different goals and experiences. Kroger, 2015. In a longitudinal study of adults at ages 27, 36, 42, and 50 years, adults were asked the following questions regarding different domains of their identity. Do you have a conception of your occupational career? Occupational identity. Do you have an idea of what you expect from a close relationship? Intimate relational identity. Do you have an idea of the lifestyle according to which you would like to live? Lifestyle identity. Do you have a personal relationship to religion? Religious identity. Do you have a political opinion? Political identity. Participant responses at each age were evaluated for the extent of their exploration and commitment to determine their identity status, according to Marcia's identity framework introduced in 10.1, Theories of Adolescent Socio-Emotional Development. While identity statuses fluctuated for each domain at each age, the overall trend was progressively toward greater identity achievement with age, with women generally reaching identity achievement earlier than men. Fadjikov et al., 2016. These findings are consistent with longitudinal and cross-sectional studies of ethnic identity, which find that people's ethnic identity labels, such as Mexican American or Latino, stabilize in adulthood, and ethnic identity achievement increases with age. In particular, generativity in adulthood seems linked to the development of ethnic identity. Adults who are involved in their community are more likely to be in the achievement status of ethnic identity. Feliciano and Rumbaut, 2019. Mailer, 2021. The concept of the midlife crisis. How does the concept of the midlife crisis fit into our understanding of aging? The origin likely lies in the developmental frameworks proposed by Erikson and Levinson. Each is influenced, in some way, by the psychoanalytic concept of psychological turmoil, generated by the push and pull of our inner psyche. Whether it's the psychological crisis of Erikson's psychosocial stage of generativity versus stagnation, or the midlife review necessitated by Levinson's midlife transition, the potential for a developmental crisis in middle adulthood made its way into weird conceptions of aging. Psychoanalytic psychologist Elliot Jock is credited with coining the term midlife crisis when he predicted turmoil for those middle-aged adults facing the reality of their own aging and death without the security of established careers or family lives. Jackson, 2020. For women, the midlife crisis is often depicted as empty nest syndrome, which imagines that when their adult children have left the home, middle-aged mothers become depressed and adrift without their apparent primary purpose as caregivers. These portrayals soon came to be associated with caricatured, over-the-hill middle-aged adults desperately seeking youthfulness in the defensive fantasies of cosmetic surgery, sports cars, or extramarital affairs. However, this stereotype does not authentically reflect the framework of Erikson or Levinson, nor is it supported by data on the typical experience of the midlife adult. Both Erikson and Levinson viewed this stage of life as a challenge to motivate healthy growth and avoid stagnation or crisis. In fact, Valiant's longitudinal study found that while middle adulthood was often a challenging time for the men, there was no greater incidence of psychological distress in middle adulthood than at other times of life. Those who found happiness from their generative efforts at work and home were the happiest and most well-adjusted. Sarah and Alex's relationship started out with lots of passion and intimacy when they were in their 20s. Once each other's safe haven in times of uncertainty and stress, they now, well into their 40s, find themselves living separate lives. Sarah has lost trust in her spouse and finds herself snooping through Alex's text messages and emails. Alex complains that Sarah never shares what's on her mind anymore, so their arguments usually end in a stony silence. Both Alex and Sarah are unhappy, but neither one of them knows what to do next. As theories of adult psychosocial and personality development suggest, the development of self in middle adulthood is inextricably tied to a person's relationships with others. In this section, you will examine the predictors and outcomes of attachment in romantic relationships in middle adulthood. Attachment and love in middle adulthood. In many ways, attachment theory is consistent with Erikson's psychosocial framework of the development of self in middle adulthood, perhaps because both are influenced by the psychoanalytic developmental perspective. At its core, attachment theory asserts that secure attachment relationships provide children with a secure base or safe haven from which to encounter new and challenging experiences. This framework was later extended by Hazan and Shaver, 1987, to apply to relationships in adulthood. Similarly, Erikson's psychosocial theory proposes that the comfort and security derived from forming and maintaining intimate relationships in young adulthood provide a developmental foundation for successfully encountering new generative responsibilities in middle adulthood. A person's attachment style can be used to characterize close relationships in which a person has a relationship partner at any stage of life, such as to a romantic partner, a developing child, an aging parent. Evidence is somewhat inconclusive on the extent to which individual attachment styles vary across relationships and over time, with the stability of attachment style varying by attachment style, gender, life events, how attachment is measured, and time of measurement. Fraley, 2002, Hazan and Shaver, 1987, Pinquart et al., 2012, Waters, 2022. Most adults identify their overall relationship styles as consistent with secure attachment. Hazan and Shaver, 1987. Securely attached adults are more likely to receive support from their partners in times of stress. Collins and Feeney, 2004. And they are also more likely to provide support to their significant others. Simpson et al., 1992. A behavior consistent with Erikson's generative virtue of care. Secure attachment to aging parents also increases adult children's likelihood of providing help to them, while decreasing their perceived burden in providing such care. Conversely, avoidant attachment decreases the likelihood that adult children will provide care to aging parents and increases their perceived caregiver burden. Carpenter, 2001. Cicerelli, 1993. Carranzas, 2010. Insecure attachment style in middle adulthood predicts poor health outcomes for adults, including inflammatory immune responses. Ehrlich et al., 2019. Gouin et al., 2019. Kidd et al., 2014. Stress is likely the mediating factor between insecure attachment style and immune dysfunction. Whether avoidant or anxious, adults with insecure attachment styles lack confidence that they will reliably receive support from others, and a perceived lack of social support is a primary predictor of stress-related health effects. Barron et al., 2016. Cohen, 2004. A 2019 study of Mexican adults aged 20 to 65 years found that while secure attachment predominated among couples who were younger or were dating, anxious attachment was more common in middle adulthood relationships and first marriages. Perez Aranda et al., 2019. Perez Aranda and colleagues, 2019, suggests that this increase in anxious attachment may be explained by the stress of simultaneously providing care to spouse, children, and aging parents in middle adulthood. These maladaptive attachment responses to the stress of caregiving in middle adulthood may also affect the quality of caregiving provided to children, with research finding that insecurely attached mothers are more likely to exhibit insensitive parenting during times of stress. Van E. et al., 2017, and promote unhealthy eating practices in their children. Messina et al., 2019. Boast et al., 2014. Adults with secure attachment styles demonstrate a greater willingness to form committed and psychological intimate relationships, which in turn increases their satisfaction with close relationships. Mady and Rogers, 2009. According to Sternberg's triangular theory of love, 1986, intimacy and commitment form a type of close relationship that he called companionate love, which can exist across many types of family, friends, and other platonic relationships. Companionate love relationships feature the self-disclosure afforded by the closeness of psychological intimacy and the loyalty and reliability established when two people commit to spend time together. The third component of Sternberg's triangular theory of love is passion. Passion refers to feelings of longing, excitement, and attraction to another person. Sternberg referred to relationships that include all three components as complete or consummate love. 2014. The three components of intimacy, commitment, and passion can exist singularly in relationships or in any combination, which can result in 7 different kinds of relationships. Figure 14.4. Sternberg's classification of love has been measured and validated cross-culturally. Sorakowski et al., 2021. However, the extent to which individuals experience each of the three components in their romantic relationships appears to vary across the lifespan. Feelings of passion and intimacy are increasingly experienced across adolescence, peak in early adulthood, and show a slight decrease throughout middle adulthood, but always remaining present at a meaningful level. Across the lifespan, men report somewhat higher levels of passion in their relationships than women. Sumter et al., 2013. Commitment also peaks in young adulthood, but does not exhibit much decline into middle adulthood. All three components are predictive of marital satisfaction in middle adulthood, with intimacy showing the strongest association, followed by commitment and passion. Yu and Ju, 2022. Marriage. Marriage is an important predictor of health and well-being in adulthood. Longitudinal studies find that married adults accumulate 77% more net worth than those who are single. Zagorski, 2005. Marriage can reduce stress and protect health by acting as a source of economic security and available social support. Subsequently, married adults have lower mortality rates than single adults. Curtin and Tejada Vera, 2019. Robles and Kiekult-Glaser, 2003. For example, following the COVID pandemic in 2020-2021, married adults reported fewer negative impacts to their mental health, even when the lockdown resulted in the loss of household income. Jason Makritis, 2021. Contemporary marriage in the United States. The median age for first marriage in the United States has climbed rapidly since the mid-1900s and is currently 30 years for men and 28 years for women. Figure 14.5. The gender gap in marital age has remained relatively constant, but the rising age is likely associated with other changing variables in adult development. These include an increase in the number of people who continue their education beyond high school, especially women and communities of color, an increase in the number of women in the workforce, and longer lifespans. Gender, education, race, and socioeconomic status also predict likelihood of marriage. College-educated women are more likely to marry than their non-college educated peers, and lower socioeconomic status is negatively correlated with likelihood of marriage. This trend is similar to that seen in Western European countries. Esping-Anderson, 2016. Jalavara, 2002. By age 40 years, about 25% of U.S. adults have never been married, compared to 6% in 1980, figure 14.6. The last 30 years have also seen important changes to marriage equality. In the 1990s, human rights advocates pushed for states to legalize what were called civil unions for same-sex couples. This separate but equal status attempted to provide same-sex couples with access to many of the legal rights of marriage, including tax, medical, and housing benefits, while reserving the term marriage for rights sanctioned by religious institutions, most of which did not recognize or condone same-sex marriage. This discriminatory practice was legitimized in 1996, when Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, that defined marriage as a, quote, legal union of one man and one woman as husband and wife, and the word spouse as a person of the opposite sex who is a husband or wife. Defense of Marriage Act, 1996. In 2013, however, President Barack Obama responded to rising opposition to DOMA by declaring it unconstitutional under the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. True reform came in the 2015 case of Obergefell v. Hodges, when the U.S. Supreme Court voted 5-4 to federally protect same-sex marriage, refer to Figure 14.7. As of 2021, there were more than 710,000 married same-sex households in the United States, U.S. Census Bureau, 2021. These couples are more likely than their opposite-sex married counterparts to be young, well-educated, and interracial. While there has been much progress worldwide to increase marriage equality, only 36 countries, fewer than 20% of all countries across the globe, have legalized same-sex marriage as of 2024, refer to Figure 14.8. Division of labor in marital relationships. The dynamics of marital relationships may vary depending on the values, preferences, personality, gender, age, and generational cohort of the partners. Most research on marital dynamics is based on heterosexual couples, and scholars have identified the need for more research on same-sex marriages, as preliminary research suggests that the gendered marital dynamics of same-sex midlife spouses can differ from that of heterosexual couples. Umberson et al., 2018. In heterosexual marriages, researchers have identified two general approaches to balancing the roles and responsibilities of a marital partnership. Some heterosexual marriages operate within the framework of traditional or conventional gender roles, in which women are more likely to handle domestic work within the home, such as household chores and childcare responsibilities. Men are more likely to provide and control household income as the primary or only breadwinner and person in charge of financial planning and decisions. Although this provides a ready-made and clear division of labor in the household, the arrangement can also limit flexibility and the choices each individual can make, and it can inhibit the need for generative change and growth during middle adulthood, leading to stagnation and dissatisfaction. Saidi et al., 2024. In contrast, in an egalitarian marriage, responsibilities are shared equally between partners, and roles are not prescribed according to traditional gender role stereotypes. While this approach theoretically allows for more individual flexibility in shared work, research indicates that when both partners work outside the home, in heterosexual marriages, women still complete most household and childcare responsibilities, even when the income from their job makes them a joint or primary breadwinner for their family. Carlson et al., 2016. Recent data on heterosexual marriages show that men are the primary or sole breadwinners in just over half of current heterosexual marriages, while 45% of women with opposite-sex spouses are the joint or primary breadwinners. And even though most U.S. adults believe that children are better off when working parents share equally the professional and domestic responsibilities of the household, Fry et al., 2023. Research indicates that when couples equally share housework, they are more likely to have better relationship quality. Carlson, 2022. Studies consistently find that even in egalitarian dual-earner marriages, women spend significantly more time engaged in childcare and housework than men. Fry et al., 2023. Figure 14.9. However, whether this unequal delegation of domestic responsibilities produces dissatisfaction appears to depend on the spouse's beliefs regarding gender roles and how those roles and tasks are discussed among spouses. Magnuson and Marichek, 2012. Predictors of marital satisfaction. So what is the key to a happy marriage? Many insights into that question have come from a cozy living room that originated on the campus of the University of Washington and is now housed within the Gottman Institute in Seattle, Washington. Illuminated by daylight streaming in through a big picture window, the room is furnished with a comfortable couch, accent tables, a colorful area rug, and a high-tech surveillance system, monitored by psychologists to record every detail of the room's occupants, from conversations and facial expressions to heart rate and skin conductivity. The room is known as the Gottman Love Lab, and for decades, clinical psychologist John Gottman and colleagues have been collecting observational and self-report data from couples to learn what makes love and marriage successful. Figure 14.10. Longitudinal follow-ups of thousands of couples who have participated in Love Lab research studies have identified several reliable predictors of marital satisfaction. In fact, Gottman claims to predict with over 90% accuracy whether couples will remain together. Gottman and Levinson, 2002. At the core of the Love Lab findings is the way a couple responds to conflict, rather than avoiding it. Conflict is inevitable in any marriage, and often revolves around recurring issues that stem from personality differences. Gottman, 1994a. Therefore, Gottman proposes that a couple's ability to maintain healthy communication despite conflict is one of the most powerful predictors of marital satisfaction and stability. A couple's ability to maintain positive affect during and after conflict is key. Driver and Gottman, 2004. In fact, Gottman cites the 5-to-1 ratio. Those couples who make at least 5 positive comments for every 1 negative comment are most successful in the long run. Not surprisingly, couples who show sustained cycles of negativity are more likely to be dissatisfied with their relationships. Wooden, 2011. Research found that a couple's ability to exhibit psychological soothing is crucial to resolving and recovering from conflict. Figure 14.11. Psychological soothing can include expressions of empathy, use of humor, willingness to accept influence, this is especially true for men, and repair behaviors, which can be as simple as apologizing or even offering your partner a cup of coffee. Gottman et al., 1998, Levinson and Roof, 1992, Lewis et al., 2015. These behaviors are perhaps best summed up by Gottman's report of one man's comment, following a particularly heated argument with his partner. Well, now that we've completely destroyed each other's personalities, do you want a piece of cheesecake? Perel, 2023. Gottman and other researchers assert that spouses who are also friends have the most solid foundation from which to build, repair, and maintain a healthy marriage. Marriage counseling approaches that encourage couples to enhance their friendship are predictive of an increase in marital satisfaction 1 year later. Babcock et al., 2013. However, recent research has cautioned against a one-size-fits-all, quick-fix view on relationship interventions and therapy, because individual and group differences create complex variations in relationship dynamics. The enduring benefits of marital therapy may depend on the age of the couple and environment in which they live, and while marital counseling may successfully reduce negative communication, it does not consistently increase long-term positive communication or relationship satisfaction. Carney and Bradbury, 2020. There may also be gender or sexual identity differences in marital functioning. Compared to men, women are more likely to value the role of intimacy in regard to marital satisfaction. Women report slightly less marital satisfaction than men, even when participating in marital counseling, and are somewhat more likely to display a mix of hostility, distress, and intimacy during arguments, whereas men prefer to either withdraw or take a problem-solving approach to resolve arguments. Jackson et al. 2014, Wooden 2011, Yu and Zhu 2022. Also, the role of sexual identity in relationship functioning has not yet been adequately explored by current research, particularly within marriages. A study of Italian couples found that same-sex couples reported higher relationship satisfaction than heterosexual couples. Antonelli et al. 2014. Similarly, a longitudinal research study examining the effectiveness of a marital counseling approach guided by principles established at the Gottman Love Lab found that the therapy was actually more effective for same-sex couples than heterosexual couples. Garanzini et al. 2017. This difference between same and different sex couples in relationship satisfaction and repair may be related to a previous finding by the Gottman Lab, which revealed that same-sex couples are less likely to respond to disagreements with controlling behaviors and more likely to use humor. As a result, same-sex couples experience fewer signs of physiological arousal during an argument, such as increased heart rate, and are better able to employ psychological soothing. Gottman et al., 2003. While psychologists seeking to better understand and support the experiences of those in the LGBTQ+ community say that available data suggests that many factors that predict relationship satisfaction and disruption for heterosexual couples also do so for same-sex couples, more updated research is needed. Farr and Goldberg, 2018, page 151. Divorce. Just as many factors influence whether and how adults form and maintain marital relationships, the experience of ending a marriage can be equally complex. You may have heard people discuss the rising rate of divorce in the United States. But while the United States does have a higher divorce rate than most other countries, 13th highest in the world, United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, 2022, that rate has declined since peaking in 1979 at 22.6 divorces per 1,000 marriages, figure 14.12. In fact, data from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey indicate that divorce is at an all-time low of about 14 divorces per 1,000 marriages. Liu, 2023. Though rates are higher among U.S. adults who are Black, have lower incomes, and are less educated. Mayo Garcia et al., 2021. Research from Sweden, where same-sex marriage has been legally protected since 2009, finds that same-sex marriages between women have a somewhat higher rate of divorce than heterosexual marriages, and same-sex marriages between men. Kolk and Anderson, 2020. Laws related to divorce have clear impacts on the likelihood that adults in unhappy marriages will get divorced. The no-fault divorce laws enacted in the 1970s allowed couples to cite irreconcilable differences as grounds for divorce, as opposed to identifying a specific marital transgressions such as adultery or violence. This change is associated with the corresponding rise in divorce rate at that time. In contrast, the legal system in Sri Lanka only accepts fault-based divorce requests and has one of the lowest divorce rates in the world. Religiosity is also negatively correlated with divorce. Those without religious affiliation are more likely to get divorced, and those with high religious service attendance and conservative religious values are less likely to get divorced. Pew Research Center, 2014. The religion with the lowest divorce rate is Hinduism. Bieber and Ramirez, 2024. The average length of a first marriage that ends in divorce is approximately 8 years. U.S. Census Bureau, 2021. The top reasons for divorce, cited by divorced adults over age 50 years, are listed in Table 14.1. The average age of those divorcing is 46 years for men and 44 years for women. Divorce rates among those aged 50 years and older have doubled since 1990. Allred, 2019, figure 14.13. Researchers studying the trend of divorce after age 50 years, called gray divorce, point to 3 likely reasons. Crowley, 2018. First, the purpose of marriage is increasingly conceptualized as a source of happiness. Therefore, when a marriage is negatively affecting a person's happiness, they are less likely to remain married for other reasons, such as financial stability, children, or reputation. Second, the increase in life expectancy changes the consequences of marriage. As anthropologist Margaret Mead is quoted as saying, "It used to be when we said 'till death do us part,' death parted us pretty soon. That's why marriages used to last forever." Everybody was dead. Krebs, 1977, pg 41. With increasing numbers of adults living into their 80s, 90s, and even hundreds, not only is marriage a much longer commitment, but the possibility of living a full life after a divorce in middle adulthood is fairly high. The third reason cited is the introduction of no-fault divorce laws, which would not have been available earlier in the marriages of some older adults. Divorce processes. Related to the rise of no-fault divorce in the United States and diversification of family and household units, legal scholars and psychologists have advocated for a rejection of the traditional adversarial divorce system in favor of a mediational approach. Within the adversarial divorce approach, one or both spouses have already decided to end their marriage, and the legal system is used to present and dispute the spouse's opposing views to determine what rights, assets, and support each person will be awarded, i.e., property, spousal or child support, child custody, and visitation rights. The adversarial approach employs an argumentative framework that makes reconciliation unlikely. This approach can create drawn-out and expensive proceedings that can cause further financial and emotional damage to the couple. Center for Divorce Mediation, 2024. When children are involved, an acrimonious divorce can increase their risk of negative emotional, behavioral, and psychological outcomes, such as feelings of humiliation and loneliness, aggressive behavior, poor academic performance, and anxiety. Sarmati and Kuldabakshi Cooley, 2023. An adversarial divorce can also undermine children's relationship with their parents during and after the divorce. Cabine, 2023. The competitive win-lose orientation of an adversarial approach to custodial arrangements and child support can also increase the risk of parental estrangement from their children and non-payment of support. Murphy and Singer, 2015. Instead, lawyers and psychologists have advocated for a mediational approach to divorce. This framework employs the assistance of either or both legal and counseling professionals to help the couple collaboratively discuss the state of the marriage and available options that will best serve all involved. Figure 14.14. This process does not require divorce papers to be filed before beginning, which can keep the door open for possible reconciliation. Mediational approaches also tend to be less upsetting, quicker, and less costly. Center for Divorce Mediation, 2024. Mediational approaches to divorce can include the involvement of divorce counselors before, during, and following a divorce. Divorce counselors can assist with helping couples work through the complicated cognitive, psychological, and practical aspects of their separation. Within the cognitive dimension, divorce counseling focuses on improving client self-efficacy and reaching desired goals, improved couples' ability to make calm and thoughtful decisions during divorce mediation. Mahmoudabadi and Zare, 2018. Within the psychological dimension, divorce counselors can help adults and children to develop effective communication skills, manage stress, and cope with feelings of loss or grief in response to the end of a marriage and pre-existing family structure. Divorce counselors can also act as an unbiased third party to assist in practical matters, such as planning how to co-parent following a separation. Birch, 2023. Parents who employ mediational approaches during a divorce report higher satisfaction with custody agreements than those who do not. World Metrics, 2024. Outcomes of divorce. Divorce can take a financial, social, and psychological toll. The median legal cost associated with the divorce process is $7,000, and those that go to trial are significantly more expensive than uncontested divorces. Crail and Ramirez, 2024. In the long term, women in heterosexual marriages pay a steeper financial penalty following divorce. In addition to facing an average 45% decline in standard of living following a gray divorce, compared to 21% for men, Lynn and Brown, 2021, women are also at greater risk of losing more assets, health benefits, and retirement savings than men, Crowley, 2018. While the number of shared custody arrangements has increased in the last several decades, most children of different gender parents still end up living primarily with their mothers following a divorce. and most custodial parents do not receive the full amount of the child support from the other parent. Meyer et al. 2022. Easer, 2024. Divorce can also result in feelings of hopelessness, low self-esteem, loneliness, and alienation. Sarmati and Koldabakshi Kulai, 2023. Evidence suggests that in marriages between people of different genders, older men may pay a greater social and psychological toll than women, due to their reliance on the social support network and housework maintained by their spouses. In the years immediately following a divorce, men experience greater initial declines in life satisfaction and mental health compared to women. Leopold, 2018. However, divorce can have positive outcomes as well. Adult women have been found to exhibit an increase in gregariousness, activity, and positive emotion in the 6 years following their divorce. Costa et al., 2000. Negative cognitive outcomes of divorce are lower for adults in middle adulthood compared to younger adulthood. Zhang et al., 2022. In the long term, most individuals can recover from the initial negative impacts of divorce. Leopold, 2018. And go on to lead satisfied and fulfilling lives, describing themselves as happy and independent. Crowley, 2019. And optimistic about new roles. Secrida, 2005. As you might have noticed in Table 14.1, in a 2018 study, the third most often cited reason women gave for divorcing men was physical or verbal abuse. Crowley, 2018. Domestic abuse is more common than many think. 20% of marriages experience physical abuse, slapping, shoving, hitting, or other assault, and emotional abuse, threats and humiliating or controlling behavior. American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, 2023. Leaving an abusive relationship often requires several attempts, as the abuse survivor must often overcome many obstacles, such as threats to one's safety from the abuser, low self-esteem, and lack of resources. In the immediate aftermath of leaving an abusive relationship, many adults grapple with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. However, over the course of 2- and 3-year follow-ups, trauma symptoms usually decline, and perceived quality of life increases. Anderson and Saunders, 2003. Blasco-Rose et al., 2010. Flash et al., 2015. Dating and remarriage. When seeking out romantic relationships in middle adulthood, men look for commitment, while women desire companionship without the demands of caregiving. Today's middle-aged adults find themselves needing to adapt to a dating landscape that includes new challenges, such as smaller social networks with fewer eligible partners. McWilliams and Barrett, 2014. These adults are faced with adjusting to modern ways of meeting people, such as online dating. In fact, several online dating sites, specifically marketed to adults aged 50 years and older, have emerged to meet the demand. Studies of online dating in middle and older adulthood find that men prefer younger romantic partners, screen for physical attractiveness, and seek a partner who can provide emotional support. Women prioritize intelligence, honesty, companionship, and socioeconomic status in their online dating matches. Hitch et al., 2010. McWilliams and Barrett, 2014. Watson and Stell, 2021. Both men and women in middle adulthood are more likely to post dating profiles that emphasize youthfulness, with women more focused on how they look and men focused more on conveying financial and professional success. McWilliams and Barrett, 2014. Almost 25% of currently married couples include at least one person who has been married before. Mael Garcia et al., 2021. However, second and third marriages have much higher divorce rates than first marriages, around 70%. Bieber and Ramirez, 2024. Brooks, 2023. Individuals who are remarrying are likely starting their relationship under more complex circumstances than in their first marriage. They may still be recovering from the emotional and financial impact of divorce, while possibly managing the challenge of blending families. 70% of children with divorced parents live under shared custody agreements. Jimenez and Washington, 2021. Maya is a single working mother raising 2 daughters. She is responsible for all the household bills, transportation, and childcare, and sometimes it feels impossible to do it all on her own. Maybe she could ask her mom to move in? It would be nice to have another adult to talk to and help with some of the childcare and housework. On the other hand, things already feel tight in the house. Would adding another person alleviate or increase the stress she already feels? In midlife, the typical U.S. adult is employed and engaged in the care of their children, aging parents, or even grandchildren. These responsibilities result in rich and complex lives filled with changing roles and relationships that provide opportunities for generativity. But they also bring the potential for strain and stress. In this section, you'll consider the different ways that adults in midlife organize and manage this role expansion. Types of households. Modern U.S. households represent a rich variety of compositions, including, but not limited to, single adults, multi-generational families, blended families, same-sex parents with children, and empty nest households. Figure 14.15. Those in middle adulthood are either neutral about this growing variety in households or perceive it as a good thing. Deja, 2020. Single-person households. While most American adults share a household with others, 20% of American adults ages 25 to 44 years and 26% of adults ages 45 to 64 years live alone. Van Orman and Jacobson, 2020. Figure 14.16. This number has doubled since 1960, with other countries such as Canada, Japan, Germany, and France also demonstrating an increase. People in prosperous nations are more likely to live alone, particularly those who have the services and infrastructure to support solitary living. Ortiz-Ospina, 2024. In the United States, major cities such as Los Angeles, New York City, or Washington, D.C., report some of the highest numbers of young and middle-aged adults living in single-person households. In rural areas, there is a greater percentage of older adults living alone. Anderson et al., 2023. Adults who live alone may be never married, divorced, or widowed, and are more likely to be homeowners, as opposed to renters, after age 45 years. Masnick, 2015. The experience of living alone seems to depend on the circumstances. Figure 14.16. Living alone does not equate to loneliness, especially for those who live alone by choice and continue to be socially engaged. However, adults who live alone as the result of separation, divorce, or widowhood are more likely to experience depression than those who live with others. Chen et al., 2022. Shrivastava et al., 2021. In 2023, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued a report urging workplaces, healthcare systems, governments, and communities to decrease the stigma of loneliness that can result from isolation. U.S. Surgeon General, 2023. Although those who live alone are at higher risk for loneliness and isolation, Murthy argued that household size is only one aspect of social connection, and that this advisory calls attention to the critical role that social connection plays in individual and societal health and well-being, and offers a framework for how we can all contribute to advancing social connection. Figure 14.17. Social connection among adults can be formed through a family of choice, which includes individuals who are not necessarily related by marriage or biology, but have formed a committed kin-like network to hold significant roles in each other's lives. Kim and Faisa, 2021. While adults within these networks do not necessarily perceive their chosen families as replacing their biological families, families of choice often serve a needed role in complementing a family of origin. Hull and Ortiel, 2018. Providing a supplemental source of love, support, and security. Kim and Faisa, 2021. Families of choice may or may not live in the same household and can provide valuable social connection to adults who are experiencing any kind of separation or estrangement from their family of origin, including those who are immigrants or refugees, adults who have aged out of the foster system, members of the LGBTQ+ community who feel misunderstood or rejected by their biological families, and divorced or never married adults. Single-parent households. About 30% of U.S. children live in single-parent households, and 80% of those families are headed by women. U.S. Census Bureau, 2024. Single mothers are more likely than married mothers to report symptoms of depression and anxiety. Liang et al., 2019. And they earn only about one-third as much as their married parent counterparts. U.S. Census Bureau, 2021. Mothers with high incomes are more likely than mothers with low incomes to have opportunities for financial loans, places to live, childcare, and sources of emotional support. Harknet and Hartnett, 2011. This disparity likely occurs because the support networks of mothers with lower incomes tend to be similarly financially disadvantaged. Swartz, 2009. Multifamily and multi-generational households. Some families may double up to create multifamily households for a variety of reasons, including reducing the strain of single parenting, saving on living expenses, and sharing childcare resources. When these households exist due to financial and housing instability, it may create overcrowded homes where available food or healthcare fails to meet the needs of all occupants. taking a toll on family members' academic, physical, and behavioral adjustment. Gartland, 2022. However, for many families, multi-generational households can offer extra support that can actually improve cognitive, social, and emotional support for all members of the household. Lee et al., 2021. Multi-generational households are created when more than two adult generations of a family cohabitate. Occupants of these homes may include boomerang children, young adult children who return to the parents' home after a period of living independently, or aging parents who live with their adult children and grandchildren. A skipped generation household, when grandparents and their grandchildren younger than age 25 years live together without the parents, is also a type of multi-generational household. Figure 14.18. While most U.S. adults report that they value individual family homes for the independence and privacy they can afford, Bianchi et al., 2007, multi-generational homes can provide many useful emotional and logistic benefits. Most occupants of multi-generational households report that the arrangement is mostly or always rewarding or convenient, which is perhaps why the percentage of multi-generational households has nearly doubled in the last 50 years. Cohn et al., 2022. In the U.S., Asian, Hispanic, and Black people are more likely to occupy a multi-generational home, with finances, changes in relationship status, and caregiving cited as the most common reasons. However, regardless of logistic advantages, some families and cultures may be more likely to value strong ties to extended family. Keene and Batson, 2010. Blended households. Most divorced people remarry, and when one or more of these remarried adults have children from a previous relationship, the new marriage creates a blended or stepfamily household, although stepfamilies can also consist of cohabitating but unmarried adult parents. The outcomes of stepfamily living vary substantially across individuals and families and depend on several variables, including the age of the children. Pew Research Center, 2011. Psychological Investment of the Step-Parents, Marsiglio, 2004. Satisfaction of the Newly Married Parents, Jensen and Lippold, 2018, and Time Since Their Divorce, Amato and Anthony, 2014. Family therapist Patricia Papernow, 2017, identifies 5 common challenges facing stepfamilies. 1. Insider-outsider views based on previous family alignments. 2. Losses and changes faced by children. 3. Disagreement between first-time family and stepfamily parents over parenting practices. 4. The challenge of building and negotiating a new family culture. And 5. The need to integrate ex-spouses and parents from previous relationships. Paper now asserts that these challenges can be successfully overcome when they are normalized, and the parties are given adequate space and time to adjust, noting that become a stepfamily is not an event, but an ongoing process. LGBTQ+ family households. 15% of LGBTQ+ couples have children. Figure 14.19. Women in same-sex relationships are more likely to be parents than men. U.S. federal law allows same-sex couples to adopt, but foreign and even state adoption laws may impose guidelines that make it more difficult for them to do so. Despite these barriers, same-sex couples are more likely than opposite-sex couples to foster or adopt. In fact, more than 20% of same-sex families with children have adopted children. Taylor, 2020. Many same-sex families also include stepchildren from previous heterosexual relationships. Taylor, 2020. Others choose to conceive children through medical reproductive assistance, such as surrogacy, intrauterine insemination, and in vitro fertilization. Johns Hopkins Medicine, 2023. Likely because of the increased barriers and discrimination encountered by same-sex parents, they experience significantly more stress than their same-sex counterparts. Boss et al., 2016. These negative impacts are reduced in communities where there is more support for LGBTQ+ individuals. Lick et al., 2012. However, despite the additional parenting challenges, children raised by same-sex parents are no different on measures of general health or emotional adjustment than children raised by opposite-sex parents. Boss et al., 2016. Family Dynamics and Family Systems Theory. During middle adulthood, many parent-child relationships are adjusting to the changing needs of children as they progress into adolescence. As children grow more independent with age, parents spend less time with their children, Larson et al., 1996, especially in group interactions, such as family dinner time. However, researchers point out that the time parents spend talking one-on-one with their adolescent children doesn't change substantially, which preserves more intimate, high-quality conversations, even when activities involving the whole family decrease. Adolescents report that they spend more time with, rely more on, and argue more with their mothers than with their fathers. Larson et al., 1996. Smetana and Rote, 2019. However, research indicates that this decrease in family time does not predict low-quality parent-child relationships. In fact, relationships with parents often improve as children develop into adolescence. Larson et al., 1996. Rule et al., 2015. When asked, comparing how well you get along now to how well you got along when your child was about 10 years old, would you say that your relationship has generally improved, or has it lost something? Most parents reported growing closer to their children as they grew into adolescence. Shearer et al., 2005. When considering parenting styles, authoritative parents who continue to exhibit high demand and responsiveness as their children develop are likely to see increasingly positive outcomes of this approach over time, including improved child well-being, life satisfaction, academic competence. Hoskins, 2014, Steinberg et al., 1994, and autonomy. Kramer, 2010. These positive outcomes of supportive parenting continue as children mature into young and middle adulthood. Adolescents who report being satisfied and happy with their parents are more likely to be happily married and engaged in constructive parenting practices themselves 20 years later. Chen et al., 2008. The family systems theory proposes that developing relationships among family members are interrelated. Those families that remain cohesive by sustaining emotional connection, openness, and flexibility may provide the best context for adapting to developmental challenges. Richmond and Stalker, 2006. Mothers may disproportionately take on the burden of maintaining family cohesion. Emotional support from spouses has been found to be the most important protector against depression compared to other support sources such as family, friends, and children. Gariepi et al., 2016. However, in addition to being the primary support resource for their children, women are also more likely to take responsibility for managing the emotional quality of their relationship with their spouse. Lascacco and Walzer, 2013. Compared to men, women receive less emotional support from their spouse and are less likely to be satisfied with the communication within the marital relationship. Barroso, 2021. Coe and Lewis, 2011. Working mothers may therefore be more vulnerable to feeling overwhelmed within the family system. When predicting the association between work and family satisfaction, there are two frameworks: the spillover model and the compensatory model. The spillover model of human relationships predicts that negative emotions generated by interactions within one relationship or environment can spread into other interactions or environments, creating a positive correlation among a person's mood and behaviors across separate relationships or roles. This perspective therefore predicts that negative interactions that adults have at work will overflow into the interactions they have with their family, and vice versa, with a positive association between mood and behaviors in the two roles. Errol and Berman, 1995. Conversely, the compensatory model predicts that individuals will seek out and use positive interactions within one role to counterbalance the negative effects or missing benefits from another role. This perspective therefore predicts that adults who are experiencing unhappy interactions at work will seek to offset that experience by cultivating positive interactions with their family, or vice versa. While there is some empirical support for the compensatory hypothesis, there is greater consistent support for the spillover pattern. Belsky and Jaffe, 2006, Chen et al., 2008, Wayne et al., 2017, including among work-from-home employees, Garcia-Salirosas et al., 2023. Life hacks. Building and maintaining your social convoy. Have you ever traveled on a highway and noticed a group of semi-trucks driving together down the road? Or perhaps you have organized a road trip with friends or family and plan to stay together in a group of vehicles during your drive. This approach to travel is known as a convoy, and it can promote a sense of safety and support on a long journey. Inspired by this concept, Kahn and Antonucci, 1980, suggested the convoy model of social relations to describe how adults build a stable and high-quality social network they can trust to be there for them throughout the journey of adulthood. This network may include close romantic partners, family, and friends who provide support and security as we navigate the pathways, challenges, and transitions of adulthood. Strong social networks are associated with increased physical and mental health and decreased mortality. Holt-Lundstad et al., 2010. So how do busy adults build and maintain strong social convoys? Sociologist Jenny de Jong-Gierveld says the key is to start early by seeking and prioritizing personal connections with others who are on a common journey. Close family members, parents of children around the same age, neighbors with shared community or values. The earlier you begin to incorporate and involve others in meaningful ways, the better you will be able to create shared experiences, and the more likely those people will be able to recognize and provide the support you need, and vice versa. Gierveld asserts that when unexpected events occur, people need to rely on the convoy they have in place at that moment. Denworth and Waves, 2018. Following are some excerpted tips from the Mayo Clinic, 2023, for building and maintaining your own social convoy. Take note of current connections. Do an inventory of who is already in your social network. Are there people you have already met you could reconnect with? Make the effort to reach out. In today's connected world, getting in touch with someone is as simple as a phone call, text message, or video visit. If you prefer a method involving less technology, send a handwritten card or letter. Go where people are. Attend events and community activities. Look for classes or groups with people who have interests similar to yours. Reap the benefits of volunteering. Join or volunteer for a club or cause that interests you. Volunteering improves your physical and mental health, provides a sense of purpose, and is a great way to build new relationships. Extend and accept invitations. Don't worry if your social skills feel a bit rusty. An invitation to meet for coffee or go for a walk around the neighborhood may brighten someone else's day as much as it does yours. Be available. Relationships take time and effort. Whether connecting with a friend you've known for a long time or someone you just met, be present in the moment and give your full attention to the person and situation. Mayo Clinic, 2023, 3. Terrell is celebrating his 50th birthday, surrounded by all the people who matter most to him. His husband Mike and daughter Lena thoughtfully planned every detail down to making his favorite cake and gifting him the air fryer he's been eyeing for months. But what will his birthday look like next year? Lena is heading off to college in the fall, and their son Will has his own baby on the way. Terrell's family life is in a time of major transitions, and the next decade of life is sure to bring many more changes. As you are learning, social development and family functioning in middle adulthood are complicated. Indeed, development generally does become more complicated and varied with age, no matter the domain. So far, you have considered the varied ways that adults might balance existing roles, such as caring for dependent children while working, and explore new roles, such as a change in marital status. In this section, you will examine how adults remain generative as their roles continue to evolve, to include launching young adult children, caring for aging parents, and/or becoming grandparents. People at this age are sometimes referred to as the sandwich generation, Miller, 1981, a term that envisions the person in middle adulthood sandwiched between two slices of bread that represent the needs of the younger and older generations. Figure 14.20. The sandwich generation. More than 40 years ago, Dorothy Miller, a professor of social work, advocated for a greater focus on the experience and needs of midlife adults who are sandwiched between their aging parents and their own maturing children, and therefore incurring a unique set of unshared stresses in which giving of resources and service far outweighs receiving and exchanging them. Miller, 1981. With a rising number of young adults remaining home with their parents, current economic pressures, and increased life expectancy for aging parents, the challenges facing the current sandwich generation are likely to only increase, with women disproportionately feeling the strain. During middle adulthood, most U.S. adults are balancing work and family responsibilities as they achieve higher rank and earning power in the workplace, raise children, maintain a marriage, and care for aging parents. These multiple roles can provide rewarding opportunities for the growth of identity, intimacy, and generativity, an experience known as role enhancement, Thwaites, 1986. However, the multiple roles can also create stressful demands on the time, attention, and energy of adults in midlife. Mothers between the ages of 35 and 54 years report the highest levels of stress of any age group, and most cite their family relationships as the primary source of that stress. American Psychological Association, 2008. Compared to men, women are the more likely to provide unpaid care to members of their social network, including their partner's family, in addition to their regular work responsibilities. Family Caregiver Alliance, 2015. When the increased responsibilities associated with occupying multiple roles result in a decline in subjective well-being, the resulting experience is known as role strain. Good, 1960. Role strain can increase feelings of stress, hopelessness, and exhaustion, and decrease opportunities for personal or leisure time. Kelly et al., 2020. Currently, 25% of U.S. adults are simultaneously providing unpaid care for both a dependent child and for an aging parent, with Asian, Hispanic, and Black families more likely than white families to provide care for aging relatives. AARP, 2001. The dual responsibility of caring for both children and aging relatives produces greater financial and emotional difficulties and feelings of role overload or strain than does taking care of only aging parents. Lay et al., 2023. This caregiving overload can result in reduced personal time, reduced social activities, disrupted household routines, lower marital satisfaction, reduction in paid work hours, and deteriorating mental and physical health. Naldini et al., 2016. Nolker and Wallace, 1985. Rose-Rigo et al., 1998. These combined potential negative psychological, social, and financial impacts of providing unpaid care for family members are called the caregiver burden. Negative impacts are lessened for caregivers who feel better equipped to provide such care and who hold the perception that they have more social support available from others. Parks and Pilisuk, 1991. Researchers investigating the caregiver burden advise that increased availability of resources external to the family is the most effective way to offset the psychological, social, and financial burden faced by caregivers. Parks and Novielli, 2000. Parks and Pilisuk, 1991. Swartz and Collins, 2019. These resources might include support and advocacy groups such as the National Alliance for Caregiving, affordable options for home health care professionals, and an expansion of benefits available from the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA. The FMLA protects an adult's job security while they take time away from work to care for a family member. On the 30th anniversary of the Act's passage, President Joe Biden advocated for expanding benefits to include paid time off, saying, "The United States is one of the only countries in the world that does not provide paid leave to its workers, undermining the health and economic security of families and our nation." As millions more Americans join today's so-called, quote, sandwich generation, struggling to care for both young kids and aging parents, we need to help. Biden, 2023. In the meantime, members of these adults' community, family, friends, and workplace must recognize the incredible value of family caregivers and provide as much practical, tangible, and emotional support as possible to maximize generativity and minimize role strain. Launching an empty nesters. When writing about the challenge of raising children as they approach young adulthood, parenting advice authors Dennis Tritton and Arlen Lawrence quoted writer Frank A. Clark. "The most important thing that parents can teach their children is how to get along without them." To achieve this goal, Tritton and Lawrence, 2013, recommend incremental releases in control to move the parenting role from director to chief encourager. This process is often referred to as launching, a process during which children transition from being dependent on their parents to being independent young adults. The launching experience is influenced by many economic and cultural factors. Mitchell and Wister, 2015. Several recent societal changes, including rising student loan debt and housing costs, have increased the number of young adult children who have delayed leaving their parents' home or returned home after an initial departure. A young adult child who returns to live with their parents after a period of living independently is referred to as a boomerang child. Van Orman and Jacobson, 2020. The percentage of young adults living with their parents also temporarily spiked during lockdown restrictions imposed early in the COVID-19 pandemic. Cultural context may also influence children's departure from home. Families of collectivistic cultural heritages, such as are found in countries such as China, India, or Southern Europe, e.g., Italy, Greece, or Spain, are more likely to expect children to remain in the parents' home until marriage or later. Most adults ages 45 to 64 years are living in a household without children. Van Orman and Jacobson, 2020, primarily because their children are now grown and living independently, a phase of parenthood known as the empty nest. Empty nest parents continue to serve as an important source of wisdom to help guide younger parents, given that they can reflect on their parenting challenges and successes with greater clarity and without the daily stresses of parenting. When asked to provide advice for younger parents, empty nesters recommend building relationships with children as the foundation of rewarding parenting and positive child outcomes. Specifically, they emphasize the importance of unconditional love, involvement, and communication as effective strategies for parents to encourage exploration and responsibility as children prepare to leave the nest. Chapman and Schramm, 2018. The empty nest phase of life is typically associated with both challenges and benefits. Many adults report feeling old now that their kids are out of the house and feeling uncertain about their roles and identities once they are no longer primary caregivers. They also report being concerned about being bored or lonely in the absence of their children. However, married parents report an increase in their marital satisfaction. Bouchard, 2014. Carstensen et al., 1996. Gorchoff et al., 2008. Time spent together, communication with each other, privacy, Nagy and Theus, 2013, and closeness, Tracy et al., 2022. Empty nesters may also have more opportunity to re-engage in leisure activities, which have been found to promote subjective well-being among individuals in middle and late adulthood. Heo et al., 2018. Figure 14.21. For example, increases in leisure time afforded by an empty nest can inspire new and growing hobbies and sports, such as a pickleball or gardening. Heo et al., 2018. Scott et al., 2015. Psychologists advise adults to approach the empty nest transition with optimism about the new beginnings it can afford midlife adults, but to be prepared that sometimes the newfound freedom can be accompanied by a sense of guilt, uncertainty, or even loss. Grandparenthood. In addition to their roles as parents of launching children and children of aging adults, 25% of midlife U.S. adults are also grandparents. This number has declined somewhat in the last decade. It was 33% in 2014. The average length of grandparenthood for today's adults is 30 years, which means the average U.S. adult will spend half their adulthood as a grandparent. Daw et al., 2016. Hispanic and Black Americans are more likely than white Americans to become grandparents in middle adulthood. Westrick Payne, 2023. Grandparents often provide important benefits to the functioning of the family system. Most live within an hour of their grandchildren and consider their contribution to the care of those children to be a necessity. National Association of Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies, 2008. Research indicates that children can benefit from grandparents' involvement. Adolescents with emotionally involved and financially supportive grandparents exhibit greater kindness, generosity, and academic engagement over time. Jorgensen et al., 2011. Most adults expect and describe the experience of grandparenting to be satisfying and generative. Thiel and Whalen, 2006. Indeed, for some adults, a pronounced longing to become grandparents was related to lower levels of life satisfaction. Dory et al., 2023. For grandmothers, taking a high level of responsibility for the care of their grandchild is positively associated with satisfaction. Thomas, 1986. Figure 14.22. However, unlike other unpaid volunteer work, that involvement is not associated with improvements in the grandparent's cognitive health. Henning et al., 2023. Grandparents are the primary caregivers for approximately 1 in 10 American children. Carlson, 2021. Custodial grandparents exhibit poorer physical and emotional well-being than non-custodial grandparents. Harnett et al., 2014. And report feelings of isolation from their same-aged peers, as well as shame and guilt regarding the circumstances that led to their need to assume the role of primary caregiver for their grandchildren. Hayslip et al., 2015. However, research finds that contextual factors, such as the availability of support, as well as personal strengths, such as resilience, empowerment, and resourcefulness, can protect against the possible negative outcomes of adults in skipped-generation households. Hayslip et al., 2019. Carmen is on her way to meet her Aunt Julia for their monthly catch-up lunch. Julia always asks the same thing once they have put in their usual orders. "So, how are you?" It's more than just small talk. Her aunt expects a real answer. "So how is she, really?" Well, Carmen's schedule has been busy lately between family and work responsibilities. Plus, she's been going to physical therapy twice a week to strengthen the muscles around her aging knee. But honestly, Carmen feels fine. Good, in fact. Her knee is feeling stronger and more flexible. She was just put in charge of a new project at work that brings new challenges and a raise. And her stepson Daniel has been doing well in school this year. These lunches bring Carmen a welcome chance to stop and reflect on her life, which usually brings her satisfaction and more confidence in her direction forward. Middle adulthood is a time when many people experience a peak in their social cognitive skills. Fortenbaugh et al., 2015. Germain et al., 2011. Hartshorn and Germain, 2015. That can enable productivity, both in their personal growth and contributions to the people and world around them. McAdams et al., 1993. In this section, you will learn about the factors that predict subjective well-being between the ages of 30 and 59 years, and the way individuals may optimize their positive experiences at this age. Happiness and life satisfaction in middle adulthood. For the last 25 years, the field of positive psychology has asserted that aspects of psychological well-being can be defined, measured, and taught. Gibbon, 2020. Psychologists differentiate aspects of subjective well-being, such as happiness and life satisfaction, as related but distinct. For example, happiness reflects the affective or emotional side of well-being, which may not always be stable across time or situations. It is a subjective self-evaluation, and therefore has sometimes been measured with a single self-report question, such as, "How happy are you?" Researchers who study happiness find that, even though happiness is subjective and can be based on potentially short-term factors, such as participation in fun or enjoyable activities, it can also be predicted by more long-term factors, such as financial stability, Diener et al., 2018, perceived social support, Waldinger and Schultz, 2023, and even personality traits such as extroversion, Diener and Lucas, 1999, Orlemans and Bacher, 2014. Life satisfaction reflects a more multidimensional and global rating of the quality of the person's life, rather than current moods or circumstances, Diener et al., 2018, and the factors that influence overall life satisfaction can vary cross-culturally, individually, and over the lifespan. For example, life satisfaction ratings in individualistic cultures like the United States are more influenced by individual factors such as self-esteem and personal achievement, while members of collectivistic cultures give more weight to group-level factors such as family well-being and the way they are perceived by others. Diener and Diener, 1995, Diener et al., 2018, Kress et al., 2018, Uchida and Ogihara, 2012. Individual differences in worldview or ways of thinking, such as the extent of a person's hopefulness, Ekinchi and Cooks, 2023, Snyder et al., 1991, Optimism, Piper, 2022, Shire and Carver, 1993, and Perceived Control, Hooker and Koss, 1994, can also influence ratings of life satisfaction, even under otherwise difficult circumstances. For example, research on the psychological impact of the COVID pandemic on Chinese adults concluded that perceived control served as a buffer to preserve life satisfaction amid the isolation imposed by the country's severe restrictions on daily activity. Zhang et al., 2020. And while there is no consistent evidence of a universal increase or decrease in overall life satisfaction during early or middle adulthood, either longitudinally or cross-sectionally, Baird et al., 2010, Costa, 1987, Diener and Suh, 1998. What people deem important to life satisfaction may change with age. Recall that certain cognitive abilities, such as fluid intelligence and processing speed, begin to gradually decline in middle adulthood. Therefore, the ability to maintain higher levels of these cognitive skills may be particularly valued by midlife adults and predictive of higher life satisfaction at that time of life, but not at other times of life. For example, higher fluid intelligence is associated with higher life satisfaction for young and middle-aged adults, but not older adults. Siedlecki et al., 2008. Higher processing speed is associated with life satisfaction only for midlife adults, but not those who are older or younger. Falzerano et al., 2022. Fluid intelligence and processing speed may be particularly valuable to midlife adults, who can utilize those cognitive abilities to manage the everyday challenges associated with their multiple roles as caregivers, employees, and community leaders. Even though perceived health is a more important consideration in quality of life ratings in older adulthood than in early or middle adulthood, George et al., 1985, people also change the way they evaluate their perceived health over the lifespan. Overall, longitudinal research indicates that overall perceptions of well-being and life satisfaction tend to increase in middle adulthood, Bucher et al., 2023. In studies of patients with cancer and injection drug users, global health was unrelated to life satisfaction, Hinz et al., 2022, Russell et al., 2006. Age also influences expectations regarding life satisfaction. Younger adults are more likely to overestimate both their future happiness and their life satisfaction, Schwant, 2016, whereas older adults are more likely to underestimate future life satisfaction. It depends. Does having kids make you happier? While Erik Erikson's work often refers to the generativity of middle adulthood in terms of how an individual contributes to future generations, It is often popularly assumed that the prescribed way to achieve generativity, and therefore well-being, is to have children. This assumption is an oversimplification of Erikson's theory and is not supported by research. In 1991, Baumeister conducted a meta-analysis of research related to parenthood and well-being and concluded that having children was associated with a decrease in happiness and life satisfaction in adulthood. However, these results should be considered in context. Baumeister added to his conclusions that parenting can increase a person's sense of meaning. In a follow-up study, Deaton and Stone, 2014, found that while parents' overall reported life satisfaction is not significantly different from that of non-parents, when controlling for factors such as education and income, parents do experience more highs and lows than non-parents. Nelson and colleagues, 2014, further extended this work by proposing that it is more important to determine why and how parents might experience happiness differently from non-parents. In a review of decades of research, they found that several individual differences appear to account for happiness differences between parents and non-parents. Some of these variables are listed in Table 14.2. What other individual and group differences might help predict the impact of parenting on life satisfaction? What other ways might an individual achieve generativity in middle adulthood instead of or in addition to parenting? Possible and ideal selves. How does a person achieve happiness amid the inevitable demands of meeting the generativity challenge proposed by Erikson in middle adulthood? Psychologists suggest that personal happiness and generativity can be intertwined. For example, care for others can produce eudaimonic happiness, a type of happiness derived from a sense of purpose or meaning in life. Eudaimonic happiness is not so much produced by activities that are fun, but rather by those that are rewarding, such as work or service to others. It can be produced by a job that is tough but makes life better for others, when a child kisses you goodnight and says they love you after an otherwise long and stressful day, or when you rescue and provide care and shelter for an injured or abandoned animal. Furthermore, McAdams and de St. Aubin, 1992, suggest that successful generativity directed both by what others need and by what the individual wants. Longitudinal studies of midlife adults find that those who have higher mental well-being at age 42 years exhibit higher generativity at age 50 years. Raynilla et al., 2023. Life satisfaction can therefore be greatly enhanced for many in middle adulthood by caring for and about others, while maintaining and potentially enhancing the self-care cultivated in earlier stages of psychosocial development. How do people in middle adulthood balance care of self and others? Change and stability, past, present, and future. Health psychologist Gail M. Williamson suggests that those who age well are those who feel in control of at least some of the important aspects of their lives and maintain, perhaps with the help of others, the normal activities that they value most. 2002, page 683. What aspects of your actual self do you value most and want to nurture and maintain? Self-care. What generative opportunities and challenges are encountered in middle adulthood? The challenge is to establish priorities and make decisions that build bridges between your actual and your possible self to optimize your subjective well-being. Professionals in the fields of psychology, education, and management sometimes use a process known as task analysis to break otherwise complicated or challenging tasks, like living a happy and satisfying adulthood, into smaller steps based on known preconditions and obstacles. Use the task analysis questions provided here to brainstorm and plan ways to link what is actual with what is possible, keeping in mind what you've learned from research about what predicts happiness and life satisfaction in adulthood. Task analysis. Aging is the extraordinary process whereby you become the person you always should have been. David Bowie. Visualize your possible self as a 55-year-old adult self. If you are already 55 years old or older, then compare what you would have imagined as a 22-year-old with your actual self. What is your life like at 55 years old? What are the most important relationships in your life? Where are you living? What makes you happy? What have been your biggest challenges? Use that visualization to chart a pathway from early adulthood through middle adulthood that focuses on one or two important goals for well-being that utilize your current strengths and priorities to address challenges and maximize healthy and productive growth. 2 important goals as I complete middle adulthood are 1. Blank. 2. Blank. How do these goals align with my current priorities and values? Blank. What strengths do I already have that will help me to reach these goals? 1. ______. 2. _______. What challenges do I anticipate in trying to reach these goals? Could be personal, environmental, or social factors. 1. Blank. 2. Blank. What resources will I need to find or develop to help address these challenges? Could be personal, environmental, or social factors. 1. Blank. 2. Blank. What are the next best steps towards achieving this goal? 1. Blank. 2. Blank. How will my life change once I achieve this goal? What will improve? What new challenges might arise? Blank. Underscore. Blank. Life hacks. What makes for a good life? Despite the way the media and pop culture often idealize and glamorize young adulthood, there are a few significant differences in life satisfaction across all the stages of adulthood. That stability in life satisfaction likely occurs because as our opportunities and challenges change, so do the environments around them and the priorities we attach to them. Riff and Singer, 1998. Based on what you have learned so far in this course, what aspects of life do you think might positively influence these dimensions at each stage of life? Table 14.3. Influential aspects of development are already suggested for some dimensions of well-being at each age. Can you brainstorm how each box might be completed?